always loved Bronson Canyon because of all the great Corman films. It's a Teenage Caveman, and It Conquered the World, and all the films that had. So I led the production there for Commando Squad, and I had built this entire drug camp in there with guard towers and buildings and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I was sitting there one night, and the caves were all lit up, and they were quite eerie and foggy looking because it was in November. And I was sitting there with Ross Hagen, who was one of the villains of Commando Squad. And I looked in and I said, you know, Ross, I said, I bet if the guy was clever, he'd make a whole movie without ever leaving the park. And Ross, like everybody always says to me, oh, Fred, go write it. You should go write it. And I said, I'm not a writer. I don't know. And so what happened, of course, is that the last couple of days of the show took place at Lucky Brown's Movie Tech Studios, and they had built this hut, the interior of this hut. It was really pretty cool set. And I said, wow, you know, I could shoot a scene for this movie that we were kidding about, where they come and they buy this map from this guy. I could shoot it right here. And I went home and I wrote a couple pages, maybe 5 or 6 pages. And when I came back on the last day of the show, I went around to all the crew people and I'd say, $50 if you come back after wrap. $50 you come back after wrap. And I had talked to some of the actors and made arrangements with them. And the film wrapped, and the producers, they bought us some beer maybe, and then they took off. And then we all went like little rats. We all went scurrying back into the studio. And I shot that scene where they come up and they buy the map from Russ Tamblyn. It was like a day or two later. We were at the lab and we watched the dailies for that. And we're all sitting there and we watched the dailies of our movie. And Gary Graver says, "This is fabulous. This is better than Commando Squad. We should make this movie." And I said, "Well, I'm not really ready." He goes, "No, let's make it now." And I think it was 10 days. It took 10 days or less to produce and cast and get this film together and actually start shooting it, because in the still gallery that you'll see, I see the slate from that night on Commando Squad, and it is November 21st. And then in some of the dailies that we ran on the disc as well, I saw the slate December 1st. So between the 21st and the 1st of December, this entire movie happened. And started shooting for six big days.
Fred would come in and go, "Hi, we're going to shoot 27 pages today." And Roy your tongue gets thick, you know, and you go, "Hell, I can't even remember 27 pages of dialogue." I mean, you got to remember all that stuff, and you got to act and stuff. But for some reason, his energy came over to us, and he made us believe that we could do it. And miracle of miracles, we did it.
I had a lot of fun, really a lot of fun, because I love science fiction. And actually Phantom Empire was one of the few that I got to do. And Phantom Empire was just, I mean, it was special because Fred did it. And Fred and I had worked together before on The Tomb. And he just gives it such a great sense of humor. You know, it's not straightforward, cold, but it's always a lot of fun working with Fred. And when I heard Phantom Empire, I said, I got to be a part of that.
And it was I believe, one of Fred's among the first of his few that he financed himself. And that I felt like I really wanted to help out. I really wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to work with him. I wanted to work with him more. I wanted him to help create this. And it was exciting because it was one of his first, I believe, financed films, all on his own. So we were all very excited to see this happen for him, because he's made himself a wonderful career since then. And it was a very exciting time way back when in the beginning.
I think at the time that I made Phantom Empire, I'd been in the business for a little bit. But prior to that, I had literally been a factory worker. And the most money I'd ever made in my whole life was $7 an hour. And it didn't take much for me to live on. And all of a sudden, people were throwing paychecks toward me. I mean, they were triple and quadruple and 5 times what I would make in a year to work for 2 or 3 weeks. So when Phantom Empire rolled around, I had a lot of money in the bank. I just had nowhere to really spend it. And I had seen the success of some of these films, and The Tomb had made millions. And I kept thinking, you know, I'm doing a pretty good job for these people, and they're all getting rich. I'm looking at the cars they're driving and where they live, and I thought, you know, maybe the way to really get somewhere in this business was to own the film, own the negative. Even if it was a small film, the profit margin might be something that would make it worth the gamble. And at a certain time, you become very frustrated with producers and people who are always telling you what to do, and you don't like their ideas, but you're bound by your contract to deliver the picture, so you make the film and you do what they want to do and you cast who they want. And sometimes you want the freedom to be the boss, to be the last guy in line, to say yes or no. And I've always said that that had a value within your budget and your shooting schedule. If you can be the boss of your own project, that has a certain value that it justifies what you have to go through sometimes to make the picture. So I decided I would take and make my own little film and own it, and I would try my own hand at being the man instead of working for the man.
Playing villains to me has always been a great challenge, because when you're playing the good guy, I played the good guy in Daktari, the series Daktari, and it was so damn boring because the good guy has rules he's got to live up to. He can't cross over. And I see all these guest stars coming on and they're killing animals and they're going, ah, and they're having all the fun. So one day I thought, I think I'd like to play bad guys because they have no rules. And the thing that I noticed, like, remember Henry Silva? Henry always played his bad guys so heavy that there was no other life to him. So I decided to play bad guys like they love their work. It's the greatest work in the world. Pulling teeth out, shooting people, blowing people away. It's just wonderful work, and get to do all this killing and I get paid for it.
This was the first time I'd ever tried to do anything in a hurry, especially anything in 6 days or less than a week, and I was completely terrified. There is no way to prepare yourself for something like this. The best way to prepare is to watch, I would watch and study movies made by other people who'd made them in 6 days. Edgar Ulmer, Richard Kuna, Roger Corman. I would watch movies. If I knew a movie was made in 5 or 6 days, I would watch it and I would study it and I would look at and I would see how long a master shot could run before it became boring or tedious, and what it was like to recompose people in the frame so that it wasn't always a wide shot. Someone would come forward and it would then become a close-up, and they would turn and then the look would go to another person. I'm much better at it today than I was back then. Back then I was just stone cold terrified, and I don't know. I mean, I would be walking to the next setup before the actors, actually the word cut had actually registered in their brain. I would say cut and I would say, Gary, over here, and we'd literally just bolt like gazelles from one spot to the next, putting that camera down.
Well, it's never boring. It's never boring. I mean, it got so boring on 3 and 4 Musketeers, but working on the Phantom Empire was really fun because it was just so concentrated, but it was like a family because Fred likes to work with the people that he knows, and everyone loves working with him. So the atmosphere is kind of like we get there in the morning, and it's, short of going home and everybody going to bed with each other, we're like a family. So we're there from the morning till late at night until the job is done, and everybody knows that they have to get this done within a certain amount of time. So it's like I said, it's like a family making something happen and making magic happen and having fun doing it.
And what I wanted to do with this film is because I knew the pressure was going to be so tremendous and the hardship, I wanted to surround myself with people that I felt comfortable with, that I thought I could trust, and I had faith in their abilities to perform under any circumstance. And that's more or less how I cast the picture. I cast it with an eye toward speed and reliability. Well, Bob and I had become very good friends after we'd made Cyclone, which I think might have even been the summer of the same year. And we just took to each other for whatever reason, and we wanted to work together. And that's kind of the situation with a lot of the people that you see in these films, is that we actually want to work together. It's not just a job. We want to kind of go down there and I want to see them on the set. And when I wrote the script, I wrote the script with these people in mind. In my mind, I knew Ross would be Court, and I knew Dawn would be Eddie, and I knew Bob would be the professor. And I wrote the script with these people in mind, so it's not like I sat down and scratched my head and wondered who would play this role. I knew who would play the role before I even got the page out of the typewriter.
Yes, very sexy Jeff Combs, very cute. very serious, but a good actor all the same. I had been acquainted with him in The Reanimator, and I was very intimidated by him. I was very intimidated by Ross and Sybil, but he made me feel real good. He welcomed me in his own closed little sort of way, and it really helped me. I had to be topless a lot, and he never once stared at me or looked at me cross-eyed, making me feel uncomfortable, and I thank him for that.
Jeffrey Combs and I had worked previously on Cyclone earlier in that same year, and I was amazed one day when I looked at the call sheet or the crew list to see that Jeffrey's address looked very similar to my own. So I called him on the telephone, and he walked out in the street and I walked out in the street, and it turned out we were neighbors. He lived about 3 doors down from me, and he knew my son very well, and him and Chris played football and stuff in the street. And Jeff had come to our house for some parties and stuff, so it was kind of natural just to kind of pop it to him, and he had some successes going at that time, and he was a very respected actor, and I just kind of laid to everybody. I mean, I understand it's the 6 days, but it was a union show, and it was Christmas time, and I said, nobody makes a movie at Christmas time. If you can find a job at Christmas when everybody else is getting ready to take a long holiday in the movie industry, you should grab it.
The best way to describe him, he was completely freaked out. He could not get into the rhythm of making a film so quickly. And we would be running through the scenes and doing this, doing, you know, the action and stuff like that, and he would still be like 4 days behind where we were at. We would be already doing something else, and he'd be going, what? And I think the film really freaked him out.
And then going over to Jeffrey Combs, no, it was not my idea to lick him on the face, of course. This is Fred. He gets very tickled in these situations, and he wanted me to lick him on the face like a dog. And, you know, you look at him thinking, Fred, you know, you're a little crazy, but that's Fred. You love him. Gotta love him. And I just did it. It seemed a little awkward at the time, but when you see it on film, unless you catch on to these things, you really have to have a quick eye and a quick wit to absorb this correctly. And a lot of people think that's very strange, or gee, why did she do that? But it was perfect. I thought it was absolutely perfect and very funny.
Fred, like Steven Spielberg, is not, he doesn't absolutely say, no, that dialogue has to stay in. If you have an idea or suggestion or something that, you know, fits your mouth better, and I have a big mouth sometimes, he just lets you do it. I think that's what great directors do. If you can bring something to that role or to that situation and add to what is already there, then, you know, Fred has no problem with letting you do it. And he says, yeah, if that works for him, then why not? Go ahead and do it.
Sybil Danning I had worked with on The Tomb previous to this, and of course I'd seen her in a lot of movies. This is back when you could go to the theater and see B movies playing on the big screen. And Sybil was certainly the biggest female action star going at the time. And she seemed to like me, and we got on well socially. And so in an instance where perhaps she would not have considered being in this picture if someone else had made it, she said, sure, I'll come down and do this film with you. And I think part of the reason was, A, she liked us, like I said, socially, and B, we had made a deal with her for a certain amount of cash, but we also gave her the territory of Germany, where she had some connections and she could sell Germany and put the money in her pocket. And at that time, that German territory was worth quite a bit of dough. But it was money I didn't have to spend on her as an actor, although I did pay her a certain amount of cash. I think she knew what her name was worth in Germany, and she acted very wisely.
Dawn Wildsmith. I love that girl. She, on and off camera, she was Dawn. There was no punches. There was, she never held back. You know, set her off, she's gonna tell you. And on camera, if you're in her way, hey, get out of my way, she'll work it all right in.
Wild, aggressive, not afraid of anybody, and if you pissed her off, she'd kick you in the ass.
Dawn Wildsmith was perfect at a certain type of role. There was, in a certain instance, there was nobody better than her. And sort of a tough sort of hard edge, and she had a hard look about her, although she did have a soft side. She looked tough, and she talked tough, and she was no nonsense, and so I would try to create roles for her to where she could play and be very, very good at. And this was kind of comedy, but she had a very wicked kind of laugh. It was a laugh that would cut through a concrete wall. If she was on the other side talking, she'd ruin a take because it'll get through anything. Steel couldn't hold that laugh back.
I don't think I've ever changed. You know, they always say you can take the girl out of the country, but not the country out of the girl. I'm just a country girl that loves to dress up in fancy outfits, and you know, that's why I love these kind of movies, because it's like your childhood coming back. You get dressed up and you go play, you know. And so why would that change you, or why should you think you're anything better or more special than anybody else? And unless somebody gives me a reason, I mean, if they give me a reason, I can kick some ass.
It was always just a job to me, and I want everybody to know that it's always just been a job to me. Not that I really like, you know, showing myself off at all.
This is the first time I'd ever worked with Sybil. And this manager guy was always on the set, and he was almost like a butterfly floating around her all the time. And I remember Sybil and I were having a fight, and we're doing the fight and stuff, and she's got a very low-cut costume on, like this. And she swung at me, and one of her tits flew out and almost hit me in the face. And her manager leaped up and jumped in front of the camera and goes, "Cut, stop the film! My God, you can't show Sybil's tit!" And so, so we stopped, and they stuffed her tits back in and stuff like that, and we continued fighting. I still think in the film, if you look real close, I think you still might see a little sneak a peek.
He starts out being really sassy and kind of macho, and then I just turn around and slug him. And that turns into a fist fight, which he really enjoyed, and we had fun doing, and he's always up for that kind of stuff. So he gives off this kind of very macho image, but he also doesn't mind taking a few hits and having fun with it, and doesn't take that too serious.
And this is where really good acting comes in. She whacks me a good one, and I took the punch really, really hard. And the truth is, I wasn't acting. I mean, she laid one on me, and when you're not expecting something like that, it knocks the hell out of you. I mean, your air goes out of you and everything. So that was definitely not acting, that one punch that she gave me.
The girl said, if you ever get the chance, just give him one for us. And of course, they knew that I had that scene in there, so they were always saying, give him one for us on top of it. So of course, when I did that, I gave it a little extra, and I think it really took him by surprise, and he fell over. So it was acting with a little bit of touch of revenge in there for the girls.
Fred had this incredible spit where these monsters were putting her on, and they had her strapped on in front of a flame. And we all thought it was great. This is going to be fantastic. You want me to get on? You're not going to do this to me, Fred. And yes, I am, he told her. And boy, he stuck to his guns, and I am telling you what, that scene is so incredible. And he made her do that, from what I remember. And it was wonderful. It was absolutely, wouldn't have been right without it. I'm glad better her than me, though.
It was just wonderful. I mean, having all those old movie props, monsters suddenly appearing out of nowhere for no reason, and they would just appear, and you're suddenly battling all these different elements and stuff like that, because you could rent Roby the robot probably for $50, but if you had him made, it would cost you $50,000.
I remember there was a guy in there, which really blew my mind. I always thought that Roby the robot was his own entity, and he was a computer, actual robot, but it wasn't. There was a person in there doing all the fighting.
So all of a sudden, Fred's smart enough to get all these wonderful props, and he puts them in the film. And in Bronson Cave, who in the hell's to say that Roby the robot doesn't live in the cave, that monster people from hell don't live in the cave? It's his movie, and anybody he wants in the cave can be in the cave.
Because most actors, when they read a script, they just want to know how many lines they've got and how much they have to say. And with me, it's the other way around. When I look at a script, I always like to see what kind of image that character portrays, because I think you can do a lot without dialogue. And they always say in film, you either have to have great eyes or you have to have a great voice. So I never thought I belonged to the ones with a great voice, you know, like Kathleen Turner, but I think that with the eyes you can express a lot, and you can play with the eyes. And if you can get your point across without saying it, then I think that's very interesting, because we are in a visual medium. It's not radio. So if you can do something without dialogue, I actually like doing that, yeah.
In the earlier version of the film, they run by this smoking crater at one point, and the smoke's coming out, and Ross says, "Don't fall in, Eddie." Oh, she says, "You'd miss me, wouldn't you?" And he said, "Yeah," and they run on. And it was about that big, and it sat on a table, and we blew cigar smoke. We were all smoking, that was our thing. Smoking and drinking on these films all the time. It was really terrible. But I blow some cigar smoke, and I think I had a little light there. But when Sybil runs up at one point, a dinosaur came out of the crater, and it was snapping at her, and she's fighting it with this sword. And it was this hand puppet. It looked like Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. I mean, it really did. And we had our art people, Corey Kaplan and them, underneath the table, and Sybil had a line. This was like a perspective shot. It was off in the distance. She had a line that she ran along, and as long as she ran along that line, it lined up with the crater. And she had little rocks where she was to stop, and we worked it out. So the dinosaur would come up, and Sybil would stop, and she'd swing, and the people under the table could see her swing, and they'd pull back. And then she'd run over here, and it would go over here. And it was really an amazing shot. I showed it, my agents looked at it, and they thought it was a full-size mock-up. They thought we'd made a big mechanical dinosaur. And it was okay. It was kind of goofy looking, but it actually worked. But once we put the stop-motion dinosaurs in the Vasquez Rocks additional scenes, you know, I realized that our dinosaur would never compare to those done by David Allen and Jim Danforth and the people like that. So I went in and I cut that scene out, and I disposed of it.
What I really loved to this day was when the three of us are stepping through the cave, and we turn around like the Three Stooges kind of thing. I just love that stuff. It was just great. And this and just all the fun little things that we had with it. It really helped lighten me up a little bit on what I was so serious in trying to do.
I thought she was every kid's ideal of what a cave girl would look like. If you were going to be running into some prehistoric babes, this is the one you want to run into. And she even made her own costume, I think. I could be wrong. But she came in, and she was cowering in fear for some reason, and she had her hands thrown over her head, and she's down on the ground, and she's bouncing up and down, and her hands are over her head. And it looked very strange, but it looked sort of familiar. And I said, what's this all about? What kind of performance is this? She said, I was watching National Geographic, and this is how the tribesmen in New Guinea, you know, this is how they express themselves. And I was tickled and delighted to find out she'd actually been researching her role.
You don't go on a Fred Olen Ray film without having a good time, and that's all I can say. I've been yelled at once or twice, 3, 4, 5 times, but you don't be on one of his films without having fun. It's almost, if you don't have fun, go home. Don't be here. You just have to. And it was a camaraderie. We became like a little family after a while. He uses the same crew. A lot of the time he'll go with talent from film to film, and you all know each other so well. It's just like old home week every time you get together, and we all worked real hard together. I don't think he used anyone that didn't. And I think that was the key to a lot of his productions, is that he hired people that wanted this as much as he did. And I think you can see the result in that in most of his films.